Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Gedunk podcast. It is the week of March 31st, first week in April. We are recording this on Monday and happy to talk to you guys. We've got a lot to get into today.
It's a lot. We really haven't been able to comment on the big story in America, which is now being called SignalGate, but that is just the appetizer to a couple of other things. So Dan, where you want to start, man?
Yeah, let's start with SignalGate, man. So a week ago today, big, huge, major story in the Atlantic, written by Jeff Goldberg. He's the editor of the Atlantic. And he said the Trump administration accidentally texted me their war plans. And there was a bit of spin for the first 24 hours where, Pete Hegseth and other members who were on this text started saying, no, this guy's full of shit. Like, this is a lie. He's I forget the exact words that he used, but this guy's a lying reporter and all that kind of stuff. But then,
discredited reporter.
The very next day, turns out that he had the receipts. So this pertains to a airstrike that was done by U.S. forces, primarily naval forces, which, just for the record, like, I wouldn't know that. We wouldn't know that except all this stuff leaked, right? You wouldn't talk about the platforms necessarily and what carrier it went off and all this sort of thing. But in these texts that were screenshotted and then released, basically Pete Hegseth is updating a group of government officials, including a whole bunch of people who should have known better, but including in the signal text, the thread was started by the National Security Advisor, Mike Waltz, but it includes J.D. Vance, who was in the military at one point, Waltz, obviously, military, Hegseth, military, Joe Kent, military. There's probably a whole bunch of other people there. And they started a group chat on Signal to talk about this upcoming raid on the Houthis. So, Bobby, what are your first thoughts on that?
My first thought is, are you kidding me? And here's why I say that. Let's not even talk about the context of what was actually in the text and the Signal chat. There's two things that jump out. Number one, how are you going to be the people to enforce standards? Because the only word that man, Pete Hegseth, has said since he's come in has been the standard. The standard is the standard. High standards, warfighting standards, standards. Okay, cool. You put tactical, not operational, not strategic, tactical, on the ground information in the same chat platform that teenagers use to talk to one another to go hook up.
Bobby, explain real quick, like, what the difference between, tactical, strategic, operational.
Good. So the United States Department of Defense operates in three major categories. Strategic is the highest. That is the White House, the national security strategy. Many of the people on that chat group talking big ideas, like how do we use military, how do we use economics, how do we use diplomacy, or what we call diplomatic, international military economics, to shape America's standing in the world. Big, huge ideas that, have little detail but broad strokes. Operational is the level that actually, for the military, where you plan warfare, you plan campaigns. So operational level in World War II would be the Pacific theater and the strategy to win it. Okay, those big, hey, what is MacArthur and Nimitz going to do to beat the Japanese forces? That's operational. What comes with that is, what do you need? Do you need what platforms you need? How many people do you need? The logistics to make it happen? That's operational. Tactical is very simple. It is the war fighter on the ground. So think Saving Private Ryan. Think of, the Battle of Midway, the actual battles, the pew, 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 pew portion of operation. So strategic, operational, and then tactical. Okay.
Right.
What Hegseth and Waltz, who are military vets, did, they gave not strategic, not operational, They went and told tactical ground level information of what was happening in real time to include battle damage assessment. Okay. What do I mean by that? Like you hit it at, which like you hit earlier, if I'm talking about we're taking out targets dealing with Yemen and the Houthis, right? When we have the press release, hey, military strikes were conducted against the Houthis, blah, 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 blah. And you understand something happened. You don't know how. That could be Tomahawk missile strikes. That could be allied forces that we pinged and gave information for them to do it. Blah, blah. No. We said F-18s. We said how many. We said what time and where they're basically striking.
I'm going to read the...
yes.
Let me read. This is a screenshot, okay? This is from Pete Hegseth to 19 other people on a non-government communications platform, all right? So time now, 11:44 Eastern. Weather is favorable. Just confirmed with CENTCOM we are go for mission launch. 12:15 Eastern time, F-18's launch. So that's probably, I'd have to bust out the time zone calculator, but probably around 6 p.m., 8 p.m., somewhere in there in the Middle East. F-18's launch first strike package. 13:45, trigger-based F-18 first strike window starts. Target terrorist is at his known location, so it should be on time. Also, strike drones launch, et cetera, et cetera. This is... If this isn't classified, then nothing is classified, man.
The fact that the sacred gate of Hillary Clinton's emails are a thing, or they're like, this is not a big deal. Let me reverse engineer some of this for you guys at a non-classical classified level. If I know that there's a target that's in place at a certain time, and if I'm an enemy force or someone that's connected to an enemy force, I now can designate, oh, they're talking about this person. Okay. If I'm talking about planes launching, do not think that the forces you're going against don't have someone looking over the horizon looking for strike aircraft. Now they're like, okay, blah, 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 which means I know, because we're talking about F-18s, the aircraft carrier is within strike range. Now I can have any merchant vessel. I can have any type of thing. And this is coming, I'm telling you this from someone who operated in that specific area. I was the second in command of the Air Defense Commander, USS Anzio, in that area. I know exactly what they're talking about. So you can't bullshit me on this, because we're responsible for doing this.
You know what else is nuts about it, man? Is like, the literal threat that we're trying to bomb and take out are like shit, like surface to sea missiles, right?
Yes.
Like, it's like, it is 100% putting, they're probably over the horizon, right? But
yes.
like there's certainly a world in which this could, if it went into the wrong hands, or what if it went to a less discerning journalist, right? Like,
right.
What if some guy who worked for, I don't know, the Boston Globe tweeted it out, right? Like, so
right.
This is serious stuff. I think pretty much, I was trying to think about what level of classification this kind of falls into. So to give you guys an idea, if you're unfamiliar, the U.S. has 3-ish classification levels. Mm-hmm. So you've got your confidential. So like confidential might be that's the lowest level of classification. So this is something that maybe think similar to like a private business. You wouldn't want it to get out. Nobody's going to get killed over it necessarily, right? But it's more an example might be SEAL Team 8 is going on a training trip to Nevada. They're leaving Wednesday at 3, and they're gonna be back in a month, right? That might be confidential, training stuff, things like that, or everything down to we're having an MWR car wash on the base. That might rise to confidential, right? So then you have secret, and so most of the military, most of the conventional force structure is generally operating at a secret level. Secret is information that would cause serious damage to the United States if it were to get out. And so most of what you do, even in a combat zone, is probably secret level. This is pretty clearly secret level. It's probably not top secret. Top secret is stuff that can get into prevent, it might be top secret, grave damage to the United States and or its allies, right? So grave national security damage in general. Top secret stuff is like stuff pertaining to methods of collection, signals intelligence,
Yeah. So
and,
what's
and
that?
that kind of stuff. And then all of our nuclear stuff is like all top secret,
Right.
right?
So to simplify it, TTPs. So we have this term called techniques, tactics, and procedures. TTPs. How you go about doing stuff. That's in the top secret realm. What we unveil, as vague as they want to say it is, we're techniques, tactics, and procedures. We could have used Tomahawk missiles that are launched from ships. No. We chose, in this case, to use airstrikes, meaning putting pilots in harm's way over hostile territory. That's another piece of this, right? And so when you're telling people when they're launching, when they're going to come back, what they're going after,
Yeah.
all it takes is a very crude, it can be a surface-to-air missile setup that's portable, movable, and you wait. And you wait. And so instead of these guys sitting there saying, we messed up, they want to smear the journalist. Like we are too stupid to understand what happens. Number one, you put sailors and aviators at immediate risk.
Yep.
Period. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. It's a fact. Because again, you have a radius of operation that these aircraft have to fly into to reach their targets. So, and don't think the enemy does not know that. They have their own intel as well. Number two, if you are a NATO ally or any ally of the United States of America, why on God's green earth would you share intel with us at this point? Okay?
100%.
Why?
And I keep coming back, these guys are military dudes. I mean, yeah, JD Vance, he was like a public affairs guy.
Yeah,
I'm not
photographer.
ripping in public affairs, but he
Right.
probably didn't have a ton of access to top secret. Joe Kent, Mike Waltz, Pete Hegseth, maybe a little less, but like Waltz and Kent are like from SOF. Like
Yes, special operations, man.
They know better. They know better. They knew exactly what they were doing, and they just didn't care because the rules, they don't apply to them, right? They can just do whatever they want. So, I mean, these are people who know better, thought they could get away with it. Is this the tip of the iceberg? How much of our national security communications is now going on a commercial platform?
So, and that's the other piece of this that I think the media has not hammered hard enough. How long have they been doing this? And I say that because they got caught with this. They added Goldblum to the chat that already existed. Let's be clear. It already existed. He was added. It wasn't something that came from scratch. For the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, to say she can't recall crap, number one, either you're terrible at your job in recalling facts and information, because that's the job, to quote Sean Connery in The Untouchables. That's the job. Either you're that completely oblivious to what you're supposed to be doing, or you're lying, number one. Number two, okay, the other mind-blowing piece of this is, right, they are skirting the Government Records Retention Act, basically. So there is a law where everything that we do, whether it was you doing it on the ground in Iraq or me doing it in the South China Sea or wherever, all of those records are retained by law. By putting this on a third-party app that is non-secure, you're now saying we're trying to skate and skirt the law of accountability. And Congress should be like, how dare you? Your number one job is to provide oversight to the chief executive, okay, who has military power, of the most powerful military in the world, and we have no idea how long they've been operating like this. And that should terrify everybody. Why? Because when you have removed 17 inspector generals when you first come into office, and then you move your primary way of communicating with the national security team off certified, classified networks, right, where there's accountability and records can be recalled, who's providing oversight? Every move that I'm talking about right now goes to escaping oversight. Okay,
Yep.
Inspector General's removed, the JAG Corps gutted. Okay, And now you're telling me you're on Signal. When, here's the thing, every last one of those people on that chat has access to a SCIF and access to classified information networks where they could have had that conversation the right way, on the record, and properly encrypted and protected from any potential enemies. They chose not to do that. They made conscious decisions that since January 20th has showed us we don't want to be held accountable. We don't want to hold the standards that we're telling everybody else they need to hold up because it's inconvenient. And then the cherry on that shit Sunday right now is we're hearing that Hegseth's wife has been in classified briefings at the NATO level. On top of that.
Yeah.
And we don't know what her clearance status is. Why is she even there?
The Hegseth wife stuff is wild, man. I mean, listen. Is Pete Hegseth the first government official who's ever taken his wife, third wife, by the way, on a boondoggle trip? Like, of course not, right? But they don't, you can't be sitting in on the meetings, man. Like, that's not, and there's this school of thought. Someone was saying, he keeps her around because people won't ask him about his affairs with his previous two wives, and she runs interference for him because there's a decorum if someone's wife is there. One more point I wanted to hit, about the Signal thing too, man, is I don't know if you remember this, Bobby. Back in the first administration, like 2016, Trump just kind of got inaugurated, and I think it was Kushner. I'm pretty sure it was Kushner, maybe. It was General Flynn, but someone was trying to set up a back channel.
It was Flynn. It was Flynn and Kushner. It was both of them.
With the Russians, right?
Yes.
Like directly through the Russian embassy.
Yes.
And hey, I'm just asking questions, man. But if I wanted to skirt all of the rules written in blood American national security laws and communicate directly with, I don't know, like someone from the Russian foreign ministry, Signal would be a great way to do it.
Obviously, a very, very convenient way to do it. And here's another thing. I'm glad you brought up the first term because people think we're too dumb to remember. I'm old enough to remember these things. Here's the thing. Remember Helsinki, where Trump and Putin had that joint conference, and Trump looked like a well-trained animal to whatever Putin wanted to do, where he basically disavowed America's freaking intelligence network and took Putin's quote at his word. You can look this story up. The behind the scenes closed door meeting, they kicked everybody out except for Putin, Trump, and an interpreter. And they took the interpreter's notes away from her or him when that meeting was over. They wanted no one in on that meeting. Now, think about that for a second. The violations, going back to that Government Records Act I've talked to you about, the same Records Act, by the way, that Trump had from his first term, the records that he had stuck in a Mar-a-Lago bathroom that, they had to go a Supreme Court order to go back and get that was supposed to be submitted to the archives. Yeah. Same thing, all connected. We're seeing a pattern where it's like, I don't want to be held accountable for things because like he said in his campaign, if you're hiding stuff, you're probably guilty of stuff. If you're not guilty, you shouldn't hide anything. Well, we saw in the first term, he hid the most sensitive conversation he had in the White House with Putin. No one was there. No one. And everybody's eyebrows rose when that happened. Fast forward to now. Everything off the record. Military strikes. It is a culture of callousness that's going to get servicemen and women killed, if not careful. But most importantly, it escapes the accountability that keeps checks and balances at the highest levels of our government in check.
So just a quick couple historical examples, right, of intelligence slip-ups that led to catastrophic consequences for our enemies, right? So the first example that springs to mind is Enigma, right? The German encryption device, which we didn't. The British broke the code for Enigma out of Bletchley Park in World War II, and they did it because there were certain German Enigma operators who were like saying Heil Hitler to start the message, or they were, texting their girlfriend on the Enigma machine in Brussels or whatever. There were some screw ups that allowed people who were targeting them to develop patterns and to get just enough information that they could crack the Enigma code. And then Churchill could read the Germans' mail for the entire rest of the war. Go look over in the Pacific theater. The reason the U.S. won the Pacific, right, was the Battle of Midway, one of the most consequential naval battles in history. Maybe like Trafalgar, Salamis, and Midway. And Midway is because the Americans started reading the Japanese code and they planted a little tidbit in there. And they're trying to make the Japanese tip their hand. And they said, hey, Midway is out of water. Right. And then the
Right.
Japanese said, oh, Island X, I forget their
Yep.
code name for it, is out of water. And the Americans read that and they were like,
And knew
oh,
where they were
it's
headed.
Island X.
Yep. And
Third
it single-handedly
example.
changed human history, by the way.
Third
Literally.
example. Third example. Much more recently, Bin Laden, right? How did we get Bin Laden? We found his courier. How did we find his courier? His courier fucked up one time and was like talking to his brother back in Saudi Arabia. His brother's like, hey, are you still with those guys from before? And he's like, yeah, I'm still with those guys from before. The guys from before was Osama bin Laden. All it takes is one screw up. And
You literally gave 3 examples that changed the history of the world based on something so ridiculously small. And this is the whole breadcrumbs leading to the buffet.
yeah,
The breadcrumbs leading to the buffet of the treasure trove of knowledge to single-handedly change history. So while people are sitting there saying this, the administration is saying, oh, it's not a big deal, it's a big deal. You and I both know we've lived it, but more importantly, we can read and see history shows and tells a different story, which is why operational security is taken so seriously. So
exactly. So guys, keep listening about SignalGate. I mean, who knows what's going to happen, right? The Trump administration has no shame. However, if we were living in a normal time, the National Security Advisor and SecDef certainly you clean house.
they'd be fired. More importantly, no, they'd have the good decency to resign.
Right.
Let's be different here. Forget being fired. They would sit there and say, I cannot sit there and hold people accountable. If I am doing this, I must resign. How is Pete Hegseth going to stand in front of troops and sit there and say, hold the standard, this, that, and the other, when they all know that he violated the one thing that everybody in uniform has to go through training repeatedly for every year? Every year, minimum, multiple times a year. If me or you would have done that, Dan, we would be court-martialed as
100%.
officers and going to Fort Leavenworth eventually.
Yeah. All right, man. So what else is going on in DC? I heard.
I went on a rant recently about the erasure of American military history. And I also made a point to highlight that it specifically targeted only minorities. Well, just when people are telling me, doing mental gymnastics and sitting there saying it's not like that, it's not like that, out comes this week the Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History Executive Order. What does this mean? President Trump signed this order and has Vice President J.D. Vance to execute, saying they're going to remove any divisive narratives or improper ideology that deals with American history and, as they believe, misrepresentation. But specifically in the order, they said, we are going to target the National Museum of African American History and Culture at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C. Now, for those who have not been, for those who do not know, that is now the preeminent knowledge keeper of the African American experience in America since African Americans were brought here. Africans were brought here in 1619. It is a truthful, sometimes very painful recollection of history. And understand, a lot of the things that you would see in those displays, my parents lived through. This ain't ancient history, okay? This is real time. So for President Trump, for J.D. Vance, and for Pete Hegseth, in over 70 days, to go out of their way to target a specific group of people in their executive orders, in their verbiage, in their tone. If it walks like a duck, if it quacks like a duck, then damn it, you're Donald Duck. And here we are. You've tried to remove minority contributions to American military. Why? Because those are heroes. You can't have that positive thing out there. You want to remove why they became heroes and the stuff that they had to overcome. And instead of using it as a motivating factor to bring in the next generation of military, you're doing the exact opposite. We're going to erase this and dissuade those groups from coming out. You come up with an executive order against transgenders. You sit there and basically eradicate and limit women's health care options in states they have no say-so of being stationed. You've done all of these things consecutively, back to back to back, with the final straw saying, hey, black people in this country, you've gone through hell. We don't care. We don't care.
Give the listeners maybe like a brief little, well, I'll do my best. You correct me if I get in these details wrong. So we've long had African Americans in the military, right?
Yes.
Starting with the American Revolution, and I mean, starting with the Boston but before that, colonial times. Since African Americans have been in America, they've been in our armed services. So there were, you hear the Crispus Attucks, the Boston Massacre. There were African Americans in every major battle in the Continental Army. Obviously, in the Civil War, you've got famous sort of works of art. I mean, the movie Glory is one of my favorite movies, right? But Glory deals with the Massachusetts 54th. As the war went on and casualties rose, Lincoln was like, "Hey, I've got to raise troops, man. I need bodies." And had African American regiments with white officers fighting in some of the toughest battles of the war. The movie Glory focuses on one battle down in South Carolina, Fort Wagner, in which the regiment led the attack, the assault. They were ultimately repulsed, but hundreds of basically a suicide mission, advancing over a beach. And you get into World War One, and you've got units like the Harlem Hellfighters, right? But still segregated, so still African American. Did the Hellfighters? Did they have black officers? At what point did that come in?
So they did, but here's the key thing people need to understand: when the Harlem Hellfighters showed up in France, General Pershing told them to their face, "We don't want you. Go fight for the French." So they had to go to the French. They used French equipment, French uniforms, reported to higher level French officers. Oh, African Americans were bastardized, okay? And the French actually had a saying, "We welcome our adopted black babies," because they helped save France. And they brought jazz to France. They brought a whole nother level of culture to France, to which still it exists to this day. That's how much more we were embraced. I'll give you another example. In the UK during World War II, it was black servicemen that were embraced by the villages and the hamlets in the UK more so than the white ones, because the white ones came in acting like they owned everything, like they were saviors. And the black service members, the members of General Patton's tank brigades and stuff like that, were welcomed because there was a sense of humility and thanks. Hey, we love fighting. And it also did this, and this is the piece that I think Trump and those higher ups at the Heritage Foundation don't want. The connection between American service and the birth of the civil rights movement is undeniable. When you go abroad, like my grandfather-in-law, and you come back home to segregation, when you fought fascism, racism, all these things, you come home, you're not taking it anymore.
Yeah.
And when you look at the original leaders of the civil rights movement, which is wonderfully told at this museum, you find a lot of World War II vets who are like, bruh, what did we go fight for? Medgar Evers, people like that. It's like, if I'm willing to die in foreign soil to stop that guy, then I'm going to come back here and I'm going to be able to eat a damn sandwich from the front of the store. I'm going to be able to sit in the front of the bus. I'm going to be able to drink from the damn water fountain. I am a human being. And see, this is the part they don't want to highlight, because if you listen to the story of the African diaspora in America, you will see that the most unbelievably, the ultimate patriots of this country are black people, because we have fought time and time again for rights that we have yet to fully experience, right?
So, yeah, so World War One, you've got the Harlem Hellfighters. World War
Yes.
Two, the first thing that I mean, you've got the Tuskegee Airmen,
Yep.
combat pilots. You've got the Red Ball Express.
Yep. You have the
Red Ball
USS
Express, for those
Mason.
that don't know, a really important thing is in war is supply, and so the Red Ball Express was all the trucks and various jeeps and those
Logistics.
sorts of things that were driving across France, bringing ammo and food and all that stuff to the front lines. And then you get into Vietnam where the I saw this number the other day. It was like 16% of draftees were black compared to like 12% of the. So over,
Yep.
they drafted more black people because they needed more bodies, right?
Right.
And these are all the sorts of this connection of black people to service in our nation's uniform is exactly why they're trying to take over editorial control of this. They don't
Right.
want to mention Jim Crow.
Right.
They don't want to mention lynchings. They don't want to
Right.
mention,
Right.
these. Wasn't there a GI who came back from World War II, and I forget the guy's name, but he was sort of beaten and ended up blind.
Yes, beaten blind. Yes,
Yeah.
In South Carolina. And here's the thing. You know why they don't want to do this? Because here's the logical thing that will happen if you're exposed to this. Say you're a 9 or 10-year-old kid, and you're seeing this. You're going to ask, and you're white, and you're going to ask your parents, Mom, Dad, why did we treat black people like this, and why did they keep fighting? You don't know how to answer that. You don't want to answer that because at some point you got to say, our grandparents did that to them. See, this is the reality of the situation. All those pictures that you see from the civil rights movement where the Little Rock Nine are being escorted by the National Guard to go to school, or Ruby.
Jerry Jones.
Yeah, with Jerry Jones in one of them, or Ruby, I can't remember her last name, the first black girl to go and integrate the school with all that protection. And she's still alive, by the way, people, having to go through that. You have to sit there and say, who's the ones yelling in the background?
Yeah.
Is that Meemaw? Is that Pop Pop? Probably.
Yeah.
Probably. These people just didn't exist and disappear. And if you don't want to answer that question, and again, these people are still alive, I'm sorry. But you don't have the right to erase the experience that these people have gone through. And that's it. It doesn't make America look good. Well, America wasn't good for everybody. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We have to acknowledge that so we can become better. And now in 2025, you're dealing with basically a movement that may become Civil Rights 2.0 because you don't want to acknowledge what happened in Civil Rights 1.0.
If I was a white supremacist,
Yes.
right, and I was in the Trump administration, to me, I would think the most harmful, the thing that I would want to get out of the museum would be twofold, right? You want to minimize sort of the racial crimes and Jim Crow, and you want to minimize like the badness, and you want to remove entirely, I would say, examples of black people contributing to the national kind of story, the national welfare, right? So you want to take away their heroes and minimize the damage that was done to them in the public consciousness. That's what I would do if I'm Donald Trump. I would imagine that's what they're trying to do.
Right. I think you're dead on, spot on with one aspect. The other aspect that I think that they're trying to do is when you see and you learn that people that look like you did some of the most badass things for this country, it changes how they can control you. I never forget, there was there's a show, Finding Your Roots, with Dr. Henry Louis Gates, where he sits down with a celebrity and tells them what their family tree is. Chris Rock sat down with him once and found out that his great-great-grandfather was one of the first black business owners in the town that he was from in the Deep South. And it brought him to tears because he said, had I known that was in my blood when I was a young kid acting a damn fool in school, I wouldn't have done it. I wouldn't have done it. It would have changed his perspective on how he sees him. And that's the thing. When you're trying to create a narrative where you say one part of the population is worthless, or they suck at the tit of society and they just drain on it, or they're a burden, whether it's black, Hispanic, Asian, LGBTQ, name the minority group, name the group, and you keep hearing it over and over again with no counter, that narrative then becomes your reality. What if, though?
Do you feel, as a black dude, like, do you feel there's power for you personally? Did you learn something about, your family or service or an African American who served that really kind of made you say, I want to do that?
I'll tell you. I will tell you unequivocally, yes. So
Yeah.
our plebe year at Annapolis, I was getting ready to quit, dude. I was like, this is bullshit. I'm out.
It
And
is
I met Wesley Brown. I met Wesley Brown for the first time. And he asked me one question that changed my life. He said, if you want to resign, fine. But let me ask you this fundamental question. After going through and becoming the first black graduate and being silenced for 4 years outside of talking like Jimmy Carter, right?
Yeah.
No one, silence at the academy means no one speaks to you unless it's for official duty. He went through that, had no roommate 4 years. He said, why are you letting someone else dictate how you live your life? Dan, it flipped a switch on me that has yet to go off. Because I got to meet him and know what he went through. You want to talk about motivation? You want to talk about graduating last? But I'm like, I'm going to get command? You damn right. That's why. That's why. Because when you know your history, when you know people who've gone through shit before you, and they may have gone through much worse, it does two things. It makes you sit there and look at yourself like, are you doing all you can to be best? And then, most importantly, I'm not letting them down. I'm not letting Wesley Brown down because of what the hell he went through. It's a powerful motivator. And so if I can take that narrative away from a young black kid that goes to that dang museum, it ruins the narrative that blacks are dependent on everybody else. No, we're not dependent. We built this shit. We literally built the roads. We literally built the infrastructure. The most highly insured property in American history was the black body during slavery, adjusted for inflation. Not even close. So you want to take this.
Wait. Teach me this, man. Wait, so slave owners had insurance on their slaves?
Absolutely. Why wouldn't they? Think about it. That is your biggest investment. Think about it logically. Because when people sit there and say there's slavery all over the world, you're right. The difference in the American version was the chattelness of it, meaning generations are born into it. If you were a Roman slave, you know what I'm saying? When you died, your family was not enslaved. You see what I'm saying? Or you could earn citizenship in the Roman slave system.
Sure.
You could do all of these things. Could not happen in America. As a matter of fact, your kid could be born, be a slave, and by the way, we'll sell your kid as soon as we get them weaned. See what I'm saying? So they don't want that told. I'm sorry, the black codes that the House of Burgess in Virginia came up with in the 1600s, they're there for the record. You can read them yourself. I'm not making this up. And the thing is, when you look at it, the insurance, think about it again, perpetual, think about it as a John Deere machine that never got old. So of course you insure it. You see what I'm saying?
So
that's the best way to think about it.
They had like life insurance. Like if you were a slave and you broke your leg and you couldn't, work in the field or whatever, like there's an
there were companies that would insure reduced output. And understand this too. Based on the age, based on the gender, based on how healthy you look, the rates fluctuated. Right? Just like the price of purchasing one fluctuated. It was an actual capitalist market on human bodies that was multi-generational. And they don't want that story to be told, because how do you sit there and look at a Donald John Trump who dodged a draft 5 times, whose family came here dodging a draft in Prussia, and look at him and be like, he's the standard, when you got families like mine who served for multiple generations, that were slaves, that were sharecroppers, that did all of this, and you going to sit there and tell me Donald Trump's more American than me? Get the hell out of here with that.
Dude, how far back does your family tree go?
It's funny you mention that. We got it traced back to before the Civil War, the Geechee Islands of South Carolina. And this is the thing that museum does too. It brings together the African diaspora in America that unmistakably and cruelty wise had their family trees chopped off. I don't know what my original family name is. Jones is a Scottish name. You do the DNA stuff, you see Scottish in you. This, that, and other. You got to ask how it got there too, right? But these things that he says is inconvenient or anti-American are my reality. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, for us to sign up in the fight, to serve, to go to war for this country, the black man, the black women in particular, just like every other person has to ask them, but specifically in this country, has to ask themselves a set of questions that are hard that no one else has to ask.
Yeah.
Why would you do this? When I turned down all those football schools to say I'm going to Annapolis, I had extended family members ask me, "Are you crazy? What are you doing? Why would you do that?"
You're a little crazy.
Right. But from a logistical standpoint where you can go to school and maybe get riches in the NFL, you want to go serve. And I'll never forget, one of my cousins said, in the white man's Navy. And they go, "You didn't even pick the right branch." I was like, "Ain't none of us in the Navy." You know what I'm saying? I mean, but those are hard questions I had to answer at 18. You think Donald Trump had to ask himself the same questions at 18?
Or Donald Trump Jr. or Eric
Or
Trump,
Jr. or Eric or whoever.
or any of these guys.
And
right?
that is why they have to hide the story. Because there are no bigger patriots in this country's history than those children of the African diaspora. Period.
Yeah.
Period. I'm sorry. Y'all can come at me. I'm sorry. Generations of slavery. It's not a debate.
Different story, man. It's like, I have an ancestor who was killed at Gettysburg. And
Wow.
he wasn't killed at Gettysburg. He was shot at Gettysburg. He died a couple weeks later in Philadelphia.
Wow.
But I'm like as Yankee pride as they come. So it's going to be a cold day in hell before I'm sympathetic to giving Donald Trump.
Let me ask you this question, Dan. Imagine that you are a slave. Harriet Tubman gets you to freedom, and you got the balls to turn around, sign up for the U.S. colored troops, and go right back down south as a member of the Army, going to the same plantation that had you enslaved for your entire life. This happened. But you don't want to tell that story.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, come on, man. That's a Hollywood script that is waiting to be written and shown because it happened repeatedly. We have the letters. We have these things. We're not trying to make up something. We just want the story to be told. And for you to go out of your way to try to burn that book says a lot.
More to come on that, guys. All right, Bobby, let's talk some hoops, man.
Real quick.
Left.
Real quick. March Madness, the men's Final Four has been set. Now, we talked a couple.
I'm disappointed, and
we talked about this.
Tell you why. I'm disappointed because it's all number one seeds, man.
All chalk.
The beauty of March Madness is you get the Cinderella, you get the University of Maryland, Baltimore County run, or you get Loyola makes a run, or somebody makes a run, and nobody made a run this year. That being said, the basketball is incredible.
Oh, it's great. As a matter of fact, I saw something this morning that said since 1996, this firm that does statistics, these 4 out of the top 10 teams that made the Final Four since 96, 4 of them, these 4 are 4 of the top 10. So the highest quality of basketball they've seen. But this is the result, in my humble opinion, of NIL. You going to get the best players if you have the biggest checkbook. Period. Don't come tell me that is not the case, because it is. It truly, truly is. Yeah, and you got to ask yourself, how many more Final Fours are we going to have where it's all number one seeds?
You got to have someone slip through the cracks, like for the NIL stuff, right? So if you, or maybe you're a late bloomer, right? Like maybe, David Robinson famously. Yep. He was like 6'3" when he went to the academy, and then he blossomed to 6'11" his freshman year or something like that. And so we've got Duke, we've got Florida, we've got Houston, and we've got Auburn. Who do you like?
As a Georgia fan, a Georgia student, there's no way in hell I can pick Florida and Auburn. I can't. I just can't. I grew up more of a North Carolina fan than a Duke fan.
He is fucking ice cold, dude.
I know.
In the game against Texas Tech, there's this one play. he drives, defense kind of collapses on him. He's underneath the basket. He's like, all right, I'll just dribble out. He dribbles straight up out through the key to the top of the key, turns around and hits like a Steph Curry three,
Yes.
like just
Like,
effortless.
you wondered if he even saw the basket as he was going back out, and he just turns and hits this shot.
The basket he basically turns in the air and nails a three. I mean, it was.
Look, I'm rooting for your boy Cooper Flag and Duke. I
Yeah.
can't believe I'm rooting for Duke because I grew up rooting for North Carolina when those two teams would play each other. But I like Cooper. I love his game.
Yeah.
I love the completeness of it, and I love the fact that the Olympic team that just won the gold medal had to play against him, and the only thing they talked about was like Cooper Flag. They talked about They were like, this guy is really, really good. So if he's got LeBron and Kevin Durant's sign of approval, Steph Curry's, that's enough for me. Now, will a superstar like him, and Duke's got other players, don't get me wrong,
Totally.
can they overcome a Florida or an Auburn, who I believe are more complete teams?
Florida's. I'd kind of like to see Florida win. They got this other kid.
Is that your pick?
I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say Florida. Man. I'm going Florida.
man.
Bobby, here's the thing, dude. Florida has the best guard in the tournament. And guard play, that's what drives NCAA winners largely. I mean, Auburn's got a good big man.
Yep.
Duke has Flag. Duke's probably the most well-rounded and talented, but I don't know that. I mean, Florida could lose to Auburn on Saturday. I don't know, but it's going to be a good game, man. I like this Florida team. They run, they play, they score a ton of points. It's a lot of fun.
Let me ask you this question: is the SEC now a basketball conference?
Shut up.
Look, down south we take sports serious. We've talked about why. But for 14 teams to get in a tournament and half the Final Four SEC teams, and they got to play each other.
So I grew up a Big East fan, and this was back like Georgetown,
Syracuse.
Iverson.
Yes, those guys.
That was the league, dude. And then you've got UConn, you have Providence. They made a
Villanova.
run. Villanova was good. You had Kerry Kittles and guys like that. I like those Big East schools because for me,
great
I
conference.
think of basketball as like a Northeast thing. I think of New York.
I agree.
I think of Stephen Marbury. I think of, that is my basketball world, my paradigm. And I get that it's a global game, and they play basketball everywhere. But oh god, it hurts for me to have SEC dominate the two money sports.
I mean, it is what it is, and that's not even counting baseball in the College World Series, and then now college softball with Oklahoma. SEC has made some significant strides to be the best, and in the SEC's defense, as they become these powers in sports, the academics of their respective institutions have risen too. The funding, the money, the visibility, the quality student they get. It's all connected because, like they said, athletics is the front door of your university.
Yeah.
It really, really is now. And we say that, I don't know if you know this, but it was just announced today that our athletic director at the Naval Academy, Chet Gladchuck, is stepping down after
really?
24 years. Yeah. And so Navy's men's basketball coach just retired. So the next athletic director, his first big hire, is going to have to put the Navy basketball program back on the map. It's going to be interesting to see.
Basketball's been rough for a while, man.
Yeah, but we made the Patriot League final this year for the first time in forever. We haven't been to the tournament since we were in school. However, in this new age of continuity and mid-majors and NIL, you can make the tournament as a mid-major. The question is, can you do any damage when your best player may be gone the next year to a bigger school with bigger money and bigger dollars? You're now the minor league for the blue bloods in basketball.
Wait,
and football.
Does NIL apply to service academies?
No, we can't, and that's the other thing. So I'll give you a perfect example. We have a kid in the portal right now, our best player, who's a junior. So that means he owes commitment time back. So if he leaves, he has to get NIL money to cover the cost of the first 2 years of his education. I don't think he's going to get it, to be honest. But he's like, why not try? See what happens. Okay, fine. But Army, Navy, Air Force, no. We can't accept that. As a matter of fact, for us to be on, our players to be on the video game, we have to sign a waiver saying we will not get compensated. We just want to be in the game.
Which would be
crazy.
Fun.
Which is cool to see that. But anyway, we had a lot this week, people.
Hey, Bobby, that was fun, man. A lot going on, guys. Do not take your eyes off SignalGate. SignalGate
No.
is uh, it is important, and it's the tip of the iceberg. And who knows who they've been talking to on these non-official channels. So, and good hoops coming up. We've got a very, very fun episode, hopefully next week,
Yes.
with a Olympic gold medalist who also was a
Yes.
Vietnam War hero. So,
Yes.
thanks for listening, and we'll hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, everybody.